like, share, subscribe, and comment.
Hello and welcome to the channel. This video is an exploration of countries with significant drug problems, and I would like to acknowledge the assistance of Grok XAI, who was a great help with this. Here in Western Australia, we're in the middle of an election campaign where the state Labor government is facing re-election. One of the problems they are presiding over is a huge meth crisis. There's a housing crisis, there's a health crisis. It seems that crisis is the word that is most likely to be used to describe the management of the Labor Party. Today, the health minister is under fire because of ambulance ramping and the death of a man waiting for an ambulance. Perhaps the best thing to do with the ambulance system is to have the state government take over the management and have it properly funded. As it currently stands, if you get in an ambulance, it costs about $400 to go only a few kilometres, and this is something that is not very satisfactory. So the worldwide summary: as of February 22, 2025, the 17 countries listed below face major drug crises, with an estimated total of over 217,000 drug-related deaths per year. Economic costs exceed $1.07 trillion annually across these nations, driven by healthcare, lost productivity and enforcement. Socially, the toll is immense. Family breakdowns, crime and violence affect millions, with some regions seeing severe destabilization. So at number one is the United States. Primary drug is opioids, especially fentanyl. Penalties for usage varies by state. Fines, probation or up to 1 year jail. Federal, 1 year for first offence. Effectiveness of rehab: moderately effective, 50 to 70% use reduction, 40 to 60% relapse. Deaths per year is 105,007, and that was 2023. Economic cost: approximately $1 trillion annually in healthcare, lost productivity and criminal justice. Social cost: high. Family disruption: 66,000 plus orphaned children yearly, rising crime. Details: fentanyl drives overdose crises. 2. Afghanistan. Primary drug, heroin and opium. Penalties for usage: extrajudicial punishment or lashings, rarely formal. Effectiveness of rehab: ineffective, 90% relapse due to minimal resources. Deaths per year: approximately 10,000. That figure is obviously going to be an underestimate given Afghanistan's status as a country without excellent healthcare reporting. Economic cost: approximately $2 to $3 billion. Production losses, informal economy. Social cost: severe displacement, child labour in poppy fields, destabilised communities. Details: world's top opium producer. Iran is number 3. Primary drug, opioids, opium and heroin. Penalties for usage is fines, 6 months jail, lashings. Trafficking over 5 kilograms can mean death. Effectiveness of rehab: moderately effective, 60% use reduction, 50 to 70% relapse. Deaths per year is approximately 3,500. The economic cost is approximately $1.5 billion, and that's healthcare and enforcement. Social cost is moderate, family strain, stigma isolates users. Details: high addiction near Afghan border. Russia. Primary drug, heroin. Penalties for usage: under 6 grams fined or 15 days detention. Over 6 grams equals 3 to 10 years prison. Effectiveness of rehab, poor, 80% plus relapse, no substitution therapy. Deaths per year, approximately 8,000. Economic cost, approximately $10 billion. HIV treatment, lost labour. Social cost, high. HIV epidemic and family breakdown. Details: intravenous drug use drives HIV spread. China: primary drug, methamphetamine and synthetic opioids. Penalties for usage: compulsory detention 1 to 3 years. Trafficking over 50 grams can mean death. Effectiveness of rehab: mixed, 80 to 95% relapsed in forced centres, 50 to 60% success voluntary. Deaths per year, approximately 49,000. Economic cost, $20 to $30 billion. That's enforcement, lost productivity. Social cost, moderate, hidden use, family stigma. Details: meth dominates, deaths underreported. Colombia: primary drug, cocaine. Penalties for usage: small amounts decriminalised. Trafficking 8 to 20 years. Effectiveness of rehab: limited, 70 to 80% relapse. Deaths per year, approximately 1,000. Economic cost, approximately $5 billion. Cartel impacts, enforcement. Social cost, high, violence, displaced families. Details: world's top cocaine producer. Brazil: primary drug, crack cocaine and cocaine. Penalties for usage: warnings or rehab. Trafficking 5 to 15 years. Effectiveness of rehab: limited, 70% relapse public, 40 to 50% private. Deaths per year is approximately 4,000. Economic cost is approximately $3 billion. Healthcare and crime. Social cost, high. Cracolandia's youth addiction. Details: major cocaine transit hub. Mexico: primary drug, methamphetamine and fentanyl. Penalties for usage: small amounts decriminalised. Larger, 10 months to 3 years jail. Effectiveness of rehab: poor, 80% plus relapse. Deaths per year, approximately 2,500. Economic cost, approximately $10 billion. Cartel wars, health. Social cost, severe, violence, family loss. Details: cartel-driven crises. India: primary drug, cannabis and synthetic drugs, meth, MDMA. Penalties for usage: cannabis fines or 6 months, synthetics 10 to 20 years. Effectiveness of rehab: poor to moderate, 70 to 80% relapse public. Deaths per year, approximately 5,000. Economic cost, approximately $2 billion. Health and enforcement. Social cost, moderate, youth unemployment link, and details equals a rising synthetic use. 10. Myanmar: primary drug is methamphetamine, yaba, ice and heroin. Penalties for usage: 5 to 10 years prison. Trafficking over 10 grams can mean death. Effectiveness of rehab: poor, 80 to 90% relapse. Deaths per year is approximately 2,000. Economic cost is $1 to $2 billion and an informal economy. Social cost, high. Conflict, displacement. Details: the Golden Triangle Meth Hub. 11. Scotland, United Kingdom: primary drug, opioids, heroin and synthetics. Penalties for usage: up to 7 years prison, minor cases fined. Effectiveness of rehab: moderately effective, 60 to 70% success, 50% relapse. Deaths per year is 1,051, and that was 2023. Economic cost is approximately $1 billion. Healthcare, lost productivity. Social cost, high. Family grief, deprivation link. Details: Europe's drug death capital. Nigeria, primary drug, tramadol and cannabis. Penalties for usage, 5 to 15 years prison, inconsistent enforcement, effectiveness of rehab, poor, 80% plus relapse. Deaths per year, approximately 3,000. Economic cost, approximately $1 billion. That's health and trafficking. Social cost, moderate. Youth addiction, trafficking. Details is tramadol misuse is rising. Philippines is number 13. Primary drug methamphetamine, shabu. Penalties for usage, 6 months to 4 years prison, plus past extrajudicial killings. Effectiveness of rehab, ineffective, 80 to 90% relapse. Deaths per year equals approximately 1,500. Economic cost, approximately $2 billion. Enforcement and lost labour. Social cost, severe extrajudicial deaths, fear. Details, meth persists underground. 14. Pakistan, primary drug, heroin and cannabis. Penalties for usage, up to 2 years. Trafficking over 1 kilogram can mean death. Effectiveness of rehab, poor, 70 to 80% relapse. Deaths per year, approximately 7,000. Economic cost, approximately $1.5 billion. Health and border enforcement. Social cost, moderate. Border instability and stigma. Details, Afghan proximity drives heroin use. South Africa, number 15. Primary drug, methamphetamine, tick and heroin. Penalties for usage, fines or 5 years prison. Trafficking, 10 to 25 years. Effectiveness of rehab, poor, 70 to 80% relapse for public. Deaths per year, approximately 1,200. Economic cost, approximately 500 million. Health and crime. Social cost, high. Gang violence, family strain. Details, Cape Town tick crises. 16. Sweden, primary drug, amphetamines and cannabis. Penalties for usage, fines or 6 months jail, heavier use up to 3 years. Effectiveness of rehab, moderately effective, 60 to 70% success, 40 to 50% relapse. Deaths per year, approximately 400. Economic cost is approximately $300 million. Healthcare and enforcement. The social cost, moderate. Stigma, youth impact. Details, strict policy, rising stimulant deaths. And number 17, Australia. Primary drug, methamphetamine, ice and cannabis. Penalties for usage, fines or up to 2 years, often treatment diversion. Effectiveness of rehab, effective, 60 to 70% success, 40 to 50% relapse. Deaths per year is 2,231 recorded in 2021. Economic cost equals $5 billion. Health and productivity loss. Social cost, moderate. Rural impact, family disruption. Details, high meth use per capita. And it must also be mentioned here that Western Australia suffers from being the highest meth use per capita in Australia. This is why it is very disappointing that governments in Western Australia have funded NGOs which hand out free needles and enable drug use through their dance party culture. For example, the AIDS industry style aid parties and the AIDS industry dance parties for AIDS, which really did create the culture of normalizing drug use. And then when meth came along, people were ripe for addiction. There's no accountability of these NGOs because it seems to me that the government departments just fund these NGOs so they don't have to do the work themselves, and the left-wing ideologues that dominate public policy are happy to push drug-enabling policies. So countries with minimal drug problems, the worldwide summary as of February 22, 2025, these 5 countries have minimal drug issues, with fewer than 100 total drug-related deaths per year combined. Economic costs are negligible, totaling under $15 million annually, mainly for enforcement. Social impacts are low thanks to isolation, strict laws, or strong community structures keeping drug use rare. 1. Iceland. Primary drug, cannabis. Rare. Penalties for usage, fines or up to 6 months, rarely enforced. Effectiveness of rehab, highly effective, small scale, low relapse. Deaths per year, under 10. Economic cost, $1 to $2 billion, minimal health enforcement. Social cost, negligible, strong social cohesion. Details, small population, tight controls limit drug use. Bhutan. Primary drug, cannabis. Wild, low abuse. Penalties for usage, fines or 1 to 5 years, trafficking up to life. Effectiveness of rehab, effective, community-based, low relapse. Deaths per year, under 20. Economic cost, approximately $500,000, enforcement and health. Social cost, low, cultural norms deter use. Details, isolated, even tobacco is banned. Tonga. Primary drug, cannabis, rare. Penalties for usage, up to 7 years, rarely applied. Effectiveness of rehab, highly effective. Informal, community-led. Deaths per year, under 5. Economic cost, approximately $100,000. Minimal enforcement. Social cost, negligible, tight-knit society. Details, remote Pacific island with little drug presence. 4. Qatar. Primary drug, cannabis or captagon, rare. Penalties for usage, 1 to 5 years prison, trafficking can mean death. Effectiveness of rehab, effective, mandatory and 50 to 60% success. Deaths per year, under 50. Economic cost, approximately $10 million. Enforcement focus. Social cost, low. Strict laws deter use. Details, wealth and enforcement keep issues minimal. 5. Kiribati. Primary drug, cannabis, occasional. Penalties for usage, fines or up to 5 years, almost never enforced. Effectiveness of rehab, not applicable. Community handles rare cases. Deaths per year, under 5. Economic costs, approximately $50,000, minimal impact. Social cost, negligible. Isolation protects. Details, tiny atoll nation with no significant drug issues. One of the most welcome news coming out of the election campaign is that Libby Mettam, the leader of the Liberal Party and the person vying to replace Roger Cook as Premier, says hard drugs in our community have gone rife since Roger Cook was appointed Premier by the unions. Families are being torn apart, crime is rising on our streets, and our communities are becoming less safe as a result. WA desperately needs a government that takes a firm, unapologetic stance on crime and addiction. The WA Liberals are committed to tackling the drug epidemic on our streets. Today we announced that a Mettam Liberal government will implement compulsory drug addiction rehabilitation for those who resort to criminal activity to support their addiction. This policy builds on our pledge to strengthen WA Police's understaffed meth task force, providing the resources needed to combat the drug crises effectively. Too many families are helplessly watching loved ones spiral out of control. unable to access meaningful treatment. Our plan ensures immediate structured care for people at risk to themselves and others. Compulsory drug rehabilitation is a key part of the WA Liberal strategy to combat the meth scourge devastating regional and metropolitan Western Australia. And as regular viewers on this channel will note, domestic violence is driven by meth addiction, and we have a crisis in domestic violence, and we also have a crisis in meth. So it would seem to be common sense that the two are linked. It's time that the government started making these needle exchanges accountable for the drug needles that they hand out, and perhaps they need to have a fee for return situation implemented so that we can also avoid dealing with used needles being discarded in the streets. The WA Labor government is very good at targeting legal gun owners, yet the situation in the city of Perth is that a resident of a high-rise public housing complex told the HIV Consumer Alliance of WA that allegedly an illegal gun was found in the possession of a meth dealer, and if there's one there'll be more. And so it seems to me that the police need to be given the resources to focus upon illegal guns and getting them off the street, and stop using legal gun owners as a distraction from the real issues that face the state. That's why I've been saying on March the 8th, make sure you put Labor and the Greens last. And some of these independents, they're not real independents, so check out who they are and make sure you manage your preferences, because it's the preference deals mean that you could vote for one person, their preferences will go to the person you don't want to vote for, which means your vote will get counted in the tally of someone you don't want voted into Parliament. Please like, share, subscribe and follow. My profile on x.com is at JamesRendell17. We're on Facebook, YouTube, BitChute, Rumble and Odyssey.com. We appreciate everyone who watches our videos. We're aware that our accounts on some platforms are shadow banned and restricted because the powers that be don't like facts about health and conservative viewpoints being discussed or put forward. Remember, censorship is the tool that tyrants use when their ideas are failing, and secrecy is where deception and fraud thrive. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.
Please like, share, subscribe and comment.